Hello and welcome in right now here to Caden's Weather Center. Today is July 30th around 10 a.m. We're going to be paying attention to a little bit of a severe weather threat today, possible live stream later on this evening, and also paying attention to the tropics here as we do have a tropical threat here that we'll be talking about just here in a little bit. I want to start off here with the severe weather threat right now. Earlier this morning I posted on my X that there was a slight risk for this whole yellow area right here. Not too long ago, the National Prediction Center or the Storm Prediction Center said this area is now the enhanced area for severe weather. So has been upped a little bit and needs to be very looked at here because not really the tornado threat, I would say, or the hail threat. It's really most likely going to be the biggest for wind threat, especially in these areas right here. So, we have a couple places that really are, pretty populated. We got Des Moines over here. We got Omaha. We have Davenport in this region, Cedar Rapids. We have Springfield. A lot of places that are going to be impacted by some pretty big winds here, reaching up to possibly over 70 miles an hour. So I want to keep an eye out on that as we go on throughout the next couple of hours. We could be starting to see the storm start to worsen as we go on throughout the next couple of hours, probably later on this evening. That's when the winds will start to really pick up with these storms, but can't rule out a few tornadoes as well, as there is still that possibility for a tornado. So right now, here is the future radar. So let's take a look at the future radar. What could we expect over here in the next couple of hours? Well, earlier this morning, so this is around the past hour or so here, we've already started to see, we're already seeing some storms still continue on in several areas here. But if we head into probably around 12 p.m., that's when we start to see maybe some of those storms pop up in the middle of Iowa here going through Des Moines. Definitely could be something pretty big to be paying attention to. But as it continues to push down over here to the southeast, we could be seeing potentially more gusty winds and stronger storms with it. A little bit of rain will be continuing on over here, stretching from Pennsylvania all the way down here into Tennessee and North Carolina. Keeping an eye out on that very, very closely as well. Then we go out to around 4 p.m. here. We can clearly see a little bit of those thunderstorms start to blow up over here, just as, stretching from Pennsylvania to North Carolina, some thunderstorms. Then these big storms start to go into Illinois. So this is where we still have that big wind threat that we want to keep an eye out on very closely. Then we go over here, zoom in just a little bit right here. Then we can clearly see around 7 p.m. Illinois right now, St. Louis, you guys are getting hammered by some pretty big storms here around 7 p.m. tonight. Want to keep an eye out on this weather, but not just this that we're going to pay attention to, really. We're also going to be paying attention to something else that could possibly happen tomorrow. So even though this is 10 p.m. tonight, we're still seeing this very, very strong storms continuing on throughout parts of Kentucky now. We start to see a possibility from something up here in North Dakota. That is your severe weather threat. So a little bit later tonight will be North Dakota and South Dakota. But the question is we see a possible another storm system going into tomorrow morning here, kind of through the same area that went through Iowa, that goes through today. So a little bit to be paying attention to as we go on throughout the next couple of days as well. We're going to have those slight risk. Obviously not too big of a tornado outbreak or anything like that, but definitely something to be paying attention to as these storms will continue to push down as well to the southeast. So a little bit to be paying attention to there. Want to keep an eye out on the storm. So please just make sure you are avoiding travels at this time, and as well as staying in a safe place just in case if you are issued a tornado warning or a severe thunderstorm warning when the winds get so strong. All right, and the big picture right now that we're paying attention to currently right here from the National Hurricane Center, we can clearly see in here in the Atlantic, we do have that tropical wave. It's a very large tropical wave according to the National Hurricane Center, continuing to push off to the northwest. The one thing I will say, though, is I would say they kind of pushed back the development area a little bit closer over here to the Bahamas. It's not going through any favorable environment as of right now. So we could be seeing a short-lived, maybe tropical storm here. It all depends on the track as well. So if we see a little bit more of a westward type of track here, and it goes more into if it goes into the Eastern Gulf, we will see a little bit more of a weaker system. If it goes over here into the Atlantic, we could see a little bit of a stronger system later on. So it's a little bit of a bigger question here. We would see majority of it, a stronger system over here off the coasts of the Carolinas. We'll definitely have to keep an eye out on that, but that all depends on that big ridge that we're watching very closely here. So we've got to keep an eye out on that right now. So we see high pressure systems right over here. if there's any weak in that high pressure, this storm will get lifted to the north, and that's something that we need to be paying attention to very closely here as we go on throughout the next couple of days. For the next 2 days, we still don't see anything forming. I mean, for the next 48 hours, we're not seeing anything form, and if you clearly look at the satellite, it doesn't seem like there's anything there. So a little bit to be paying attention to as we go on throughout the next couple of days. Probably in the next day or two, we can start to see these chances start to go up here for the next 2 days. So something big to be paying attention to as we continue to watch and monitor this storm. So Florida in the southeast needs to really watch this storm very closely. Now, as the Atlantic is not going crazy right now, only has one area of interest, we do have an Eastern Pacific, that is kind of going crazy right now. As you can see, there's the disturbance right there that's going to push off to the west, not looking like it's going to have the best opportunities of forming here. But then we keep an eye out on this one right here. This is going to be our next tropical depression here, most likely by today, maybe a tropical storm. We'll have to take a look at that. Then we have another area of development right in possibly here, but like a 10% chance for, or 0% chance for the next 2 days here. That is because there is a tropical wave actually coming over here into the Eastern Pacific. So a little bit to be paying attention to, but the one thing I want to say is that all of this, since it's going really favorable right now in the Eastern Pacific, this will push off to the east, and then the Atlantic starts getting involved with more favorable environments here. Then we head in over here to the 2-day outlook right now for the Eastern Pacific. 10% chance for this one in the next 48 hours. Most likely will not form. This one's already looking very healthy and very organized. Invest 94E. Want to keep an eye out on that because, I mean, it's not going to impact anyone, but right now I would say parts of Mexico definitely could be getting some high surf just because of that, because of this system. So definitely want to keep an eye out on this very, very closely. Then we take a look here at the spaghetti models for Invest 94E. Very, very, pretty confident on where it's going to go. Obviously, it's staying out into the ocean, so that's at least some type of good news right there. It's not going to impact anyone, but just to put it on the screen here, where is it going to head? It ain't heading for anyone, so it's just going to be a big fish storm out there in the Eastern Pacific. So, but there is some time for it to develop into something possible, a hurricane. So we'll definitely have to keep an eye out on that over here for the next couple of days to see if it does get to that hurricane status. So let's take a look right now here at the Atlantic. Let's head over to the Atlantic side. We've been tracking this tropical wave here for the past couple of days. We've been tracking it very closely here. We head into around 54, 60, 72 hours. Not really seeing a lot on the models here for the European model. Head into 114 hours. This is where we see a little bit more of that favorable, area that we could be seeing a possible tropical storm, maybe even a tropical depression. So a little bit to be paying attention to, because so far this isn't going to be too big of an organized storm. Now, the one thing I will say is that the European model is keeping it still in this area right here. The European model is bringing it still into this area where it's not hitting Florida anymore. Before, it really it went into Florida. It was very spread out here, but now it's pretty consistent on being onto the East Coast here. So, but that doesn't mean the United States isn't out of play. We could definitely see possibly something over here for the northeast parts of the North Carolina, and then we also can clearly see though that we still have some models going into South Carolina. So it all depends right now on still once again how big is that high pressure and how strong is it. That is what is going to really play the big factor here for the steering system here, for the steering of this system. So we want to keep an eye out on that very, very closely. But once again, the probabilities so far are going up by the European model here for a tropical depression. If we head over to tropical storm probabilities, a tropical storm most likely not expected to form. That chances don't start until 48 to 96 hours out, according to the European model. So, and then starts to pick up just a little bit more over here as we continue to pay attention to this. Look at that. 144, 168 hours out. That's when we see that storm move off to the northeast, according to the European model, but still doesn't have the most highest chances for a tropical storm. So the European model might not even say a tropical storm could form, or maybe a small tropical storm could form out of the system. But, once again, like I just said, if it goes off to the northeast here, we have a little bit more of a stronger type of system here. But if it goes off to the west, a little bit more of a weaker system, or possibly not even a system at all. So a little bit to be paying attention to right now as we continue on. Let's take a look at a little bit of the models here. We've been tracking these models for the past couple of days. It's really been crazy here with the models. We want to keep an eye out, obviously, on this really closely here. So the GFS model, this is where, let's go to the 00Z. you could clearly see the GFS. There is our storm right here, right over the Dominican Republic and right over parts of Cuba as well. Very, very long tropical wave. Then we continue to watch it move off and not very organized at all. There's that Eastern Pacific storm right there. But look at this. There's that system right there. Not very strong at all. Not even a low pressure or a spin on the GFS that we could see. But as you kind of can see, though, the reason why this goes off to the west here is because that high pressure is just too strong for it to get pulled to the north. And that's what the GFS has been thinking for a pretty good amount of time here. But this is where it gets a little bit interesting here with the GFS. Yes, this might be possible here of a tropical storm possibly in the northern Gulf. Is it likely? Not as likely right now, but definitely something to pay attention to. But what's going to happen next, according to the GFS, is definitely not likely here. I would say this is most likely probably not going to happen, where it's going to rapidly intensify and then go hit Texas and Louisiana. So, I mean, yes, there's a possibility, but the GFS, we know how the GFS is. So something definitely to be paying attention to keep an eye out on. And then, as the storm passes, that high pressure starts to build up around over here. So a little bit more to be paying attention to as we go on throughout the next couple days, especially with the GFS. GFS has not always been the best model, so definitely something to pay attention to. Taking a look here at the European model, though, we take a look at the European. There's our storm right here. There's our storm for the European model. Still not very strong at all. Then we watch it still. There it is right over there. Maybe possibly putting a lot of rain down in the southeast, but before it gets pulled off to the north, we see, a possible maybe short-lived tropical storm. But this is a little bit of an interesting one. The 00Z model right now, bringing it into Florida, and then we'll bring it out of Florida here. So a little bit more of an interesting type of situation, could happen. And if it really goes over Florida like that, we could definitely be seeing lots of heavy rainfall in the state of Florida. And then as it continues to push off over here, it could definitely possibly dump heavy amounts of rain in the Carolinas as well. So the Euro model has really pushed back on, or has put a more of a westward type of track now, but still very, very small storm here. And take a look here at the precipitation. It says majority of that rain will start to just stay off of the coast of the United States here. So, but still, could be seeing possibly 1-2 inches of rain if the model is right going into Florida. So a little bit to be paying attention to here. Obviously, we have a lot to be paying attention to over the next couple of hours and couple days here, and the next couple of model runs. But just like yesterday, let's take a look at the CMC model here. CMC model, taking a look at that right now. There it is. So there's our little tropical wave right here. Not very strong at all. This will go into the Gulf of Mexico here, so the Eastern Gulf, and then we'll get pulled over here out of Florida pretty quickly, and then possibly get a little bit strong according to the CMC once it gets out here in the Atlantic. So a little bit something to be paying attention to as long, with the CMC as well. Even though we don't look at these models too much with the CMC, but it still is the possibility out there. Now the Icon, yesterday when I filmed a video, we were paying attention to it really on the west coast of Florida. The Icon has a whole different personality now, saying that this storm will, obviously still be pretty weak and will head up the east coast of Florida here. But once again, as it goes out here into the Atlantic, that's when the Icon model is expecting for a storm to possibly form, to possibly maybe a slow or a slight hurricane. We'll definitely have to keep an eye out on that, as after that it races off to the northeast. So a little bit to be paying attention to. Really, it's just a lot to be paying attention to. There's a lot to be paying attention to, and over the next couple of days, could we start to see an invest out of it? We'll have to pay attention to it right now. Could we see a high risk later on today from the National Hurricane Center? We could. It's just not looking too organized right now, as it's going through some unfavorable environment. So, but thank you so much for watching here. Please make sure, if you do like the video, please make sure you leave a like down below, and make sure to follow my X's down in the description. And I hope to see you in the next video. Bye-bye.